Hey, everybody, welcome on back. It's the Twisted History Podcast. This is the Twisted History of 100 years ago, a.k.a. the Twisted History of 1925, and Twisted History is sponsored by BetterHelp. Every January brings you 365 blank pages just waiting to be filled. So in 2025, maybe you're ready for a plot twist, or maybe there's a part of your story you've been wanting to revisit. Life isn't about resolutions that fade by February. Usually it's not even February. Quitter's Day is the second Friday in January. Most people give up their resolutions by the second Friday in January, which is wild.
Did you make one this year?
No. Think of your editorial partner helping you write new chapters and create the meaningful story you deserve to live. Think of therapy as that partner. And I'm telling you right now, when Annie and I are here talking about stuff like BetterHelp, which is finding a therapist who fits you and how well it can be for your peace of mind, you also have to think about your children. Like if your children need someone to talk to, this might be a good option for them. Don't be so selfish. This thing can help everybody in your family. BetterHelp is fully online, making therapy affordable and convenient, serving over 5 million people worldwide. You can access a diverse network of more than 30,000 credentialed therapists with a wide range of specialties. Write your story with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/twisted today. Get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/twisted. Welcome on back, everybody. Happy belated New Year. I have terrible, terrible news. We do not have Jeff Vibert in this episode of Twisted History because he was called away at the very last minute to do some content with none other than my good friend Chris Klemmer. They're going up and down the Eastern Seaboard, I believe, searching for purple hats, perhaps. I think that's the quest for the purple hats. So Jeff, unfortunately, will not be with us today. I've had a weird schedule lately, as has John, as has the Saint. So this is when we have to do it. And unfortunately, my guy Vibs is here. I do have an Indiana tidbit. So even though we're going to miss Vibs, he'll be back next episode. It's myself, the love of my wife, St. Anne, and John. John on the ones and twos. John Kelly, handsome John on the ones and twos. Recently back from yet another boondoggle somewhere exotic and far away. Where are you coming back from right now?
Australia.
Brisbane.
Yeah. Time traveling.
Have you been to Sydney?
No, it was the first time in the continent.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you were only in Brisbane?
Yeah.
How was it?
Unfortunately. I would have liked to have gotten more places, but yeah,
right.
it was nice. Yeah, it wasn't as exotic as I thought it was going to be.
Did you feel like you were going to be eaten by everything?
No, that's what I mean. It kind of felt like a cross between like West Palm Beach, because it was like very beachy and nice.
Right.
Like a Pottery Barn, like a mall. Like nice like car dealerships, kind of like, yeah.
Am I pronouncing it right? Is it Brisbane or Brisbane?
I don't know. Brisbane.
I've always heard Brisbane.
Yeah, I think Brisbane.
Right. Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Brisbane.
But it was fun. The koalas we'll talk about.
Yeah, why would you do that? You
That's
know,
what all the locals said, though.
better.
They were like, you got to check out the koala sanctuary, and it was awesome.
Did you get tested yet?
Chlamydia?
I don't think they can pass it to humans.
Please go back to the twisted history of, I don't even know when we spoke about koalas, but
it could have been animals. We've done animals before.
We've done Australia.
Yep, we did Australia.
I'm sure we covered it in Australia. You had done it in a blog.
I've done it in a blog. Koalas are assholes. They're riddled with chlamydia. They don't have a nice voice.
No, they scream.
Like,
they're worse than me.
I will say, though, apparently that's rare, because I didn't hear any screams.
Really?
Yeah.
They're clumsy. They're not
maybe in the
athletes.
wild.
Maybe.
Yeah.
When they're getting like killed and mowed down.
And
their claws
I won't shit all over. You know what? Here's random something that I had read last week. Disney's Frozen. Do you know this?
What?
I mentioned it to you, obviously, Henny. A lot of times, with the kids, I would say, hey, do you remember how much Mick used to watch Cars? Do you remember how much Finn used to watch Up? Do you remember how much I used to watch Bambi? Always. Do you remember how much Bridget used to watch Disney's Frozen? It seems like everybody puts Disney in front of Frozen, and more so than any of the other movies that Disney has put out. And then I read something this week. The reason they do that is because when someone goes to Google Walt Disney's frozen head, because apparently his head is being held in cryovac. Yeah. Supposedly they froze his head after he had died. I don't believe it's true. Maybe it is. I really don't give a shit. A lot of people were there when he was cremated. Perhaps they didn't cremate his head.
Wait, you're talking about Walt Disney?
Walt Disney.
Yeah, I thought that was confirmed true.
They said that Ted.
Yeah,
Ted
both those guys are cryo frozen, right?
Right.
Oh, you think it's a lie?
I think it's a lie. I think if it's not a lie, they don't want it out there. This is a conspiracy theory type thing. So they call it Disney's Frozen. So when you go to Google Disney's Frozen head, pops up Ella and Anya letting it go. And that's Disney's way of saying for everybody who believes this conspiracy, maybe you should let it go.
It is not
You know
true.
what I'm saying?
His head is not cryogenically frozen
okay.
anywhere. As per his family, he was cremated shortly after he died from lung cancer in 1966.
Yeah, that's what they say. But maybe they didn't cremate the head. Either way, that was something that I found weird. Disney's Frozen. And if you Google it, you will find the movie, and you do see mention of Walt Disney's head anytime on that first page in Google. Next week, next episode of Twisted History with Twisted History of Frozen Heads. But either way, so this one here is going to be on 100 years ago. And the reason I did that is because as we get into January of 2025, which is ending in just a few days, a lot of people are calling this first month the longest 10 years of their life, right? It just seems like everything that can happen has happened in the last 30 days or so. So Israel and Hamas agreed to a 3-phase ceasefire. LA wildfires burned through thousands of acres. I don't know where the death toll is up to now, but it was 27 last time that I looked. Trump's inauguration, which made some people comically mad and other people comically happy, right? But it was certainly something that was extremely splashy. Here's something that had happened in January that nobody paid attention to. Liechtenstein. Liechtenstein became the 37th country to legalize same-sex marriage. Why would I mention that? The reason I mention that is because I know a little bit about Liechtenstein.
And the number's 29 now.
29?
Yeah,
Okay. 20.
sadly.
It's up to 29 to death toll from the LA fires?
Correct.
You're saying? Yeah.
It is.
It's terrible. Liechtenstein, it became the 37th country to legalize same-sex marriage. Let's talk about Liechtenstein. I'd given you guys a geography lesson once, and when it came to Scandinavia. If you don't remember it, I'll repeat it briefly. As you get to the western side of Russia, the western side of Russia, northwestern side of Russia, ends where Scandinavia begins. And it was my opinion that Scandinavia looks like a flaccid penis dropping a load onto Germany. And a lot of people agreed with me. So if you bring up a map of Scandinavia, you could see that off of Russia, Finland is actually the testicles. Finland is actually the testicles that are adhering to the torso that is Russia. From the testicles drops this flaccid penis, and the flaccid penis, if you drew a line right down the middle, the left side of the penis is Norway, the right side of the stem of the penis is Sweden. And they kind of open up towards the end, as does a penis, and from that they drop a milky load called Denmark right onto the northern part of Germany. And then Iceland just kind of exists above it. Iceland is kind of off in the distance above Norway. So I like when people now know that as a geography lesson, almost exclusively because of me. Here's a similar geography lesson. Where is Liechtenstein? If I was to give either of the two people that I'm here with right now, two intelligent, well-traveled people, a map and said, point to Liechtenstein, I am dead fucking confident that neither would be able to do it. And so, since our listeners are typically well-read and intelligent people, let me clear this up. Whereas Scandinavia is a flaccid cock dumping a load onto Germany, I'd like to consider Liechtenstein the G-spot. I could use the C word here, but it's the G-spot because not a lot of people know where it is, but they're very happy when they find it. So where is the G-spot on a woman? I could tell you right now, I'm not sure, but I know it's certainly above her boots. And that's what Italy is. Italy is a fucking boot.
Well
Once you
played.
get to the top of a woman's legs, I don't know what's going on in there anymore. I really don't. And I've been married to the same Liechtenstein for the past 26 years, and I'm learning more and more about that every day. So if you look in there, you have to search around. And much like the G-spot, Liechtenstein is kind of in the middle of where everything is happening. You know, you have Portugal, Spain, France, and then, you know, Europe gets a little bit murky. And in there, there's a G spot called Liechtenstein. It's tough to find, but once you
Appropriately
do,
named, wouldn't you say?
everybody is absolutely happy. Yeah, the Liechtenstein, I just put it in there. How big is it? It's not very big. You know what's bigger than Liechtenstein? Brooklyn. I think Brooklyn might have almost 70 square miles. Liechtenstein is 62 square miles. It has a population of only 40,000 people. It's the world's smallest country to border two other countries. You know, there's a lot of small island nations. It has no army. And it's one of the few countries, along with like Macau and Brunei and a couple other places, that has no national debt.
No.
Liechtenstein is wonderful, much like the G-spot, right?
wonderful.
So, and it has no debt. It used to be a huge tax haven for billionaires, but all that shit stopped in 2008. And you know who the most famous person to be born in Liechtenstein is? Neither do I. Nobody comes from there unless you're a huge fan of like winter sports, because obviously you have the Alps not too far away. There is some sort of Olympic sport legends there, a couple of soccer footballers and whatnot.
Is it former USSR?
Nobody belongs. No. So Liechtenstein, people wonder why it doesn't join Switzerland.
Which is
Yeah,
northeast
like
of it.
so for some reason it's like you would think that it would be part of Germany. To be
so
quite honest
south
with
of
it.
there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
There's
so
one
anyway,
Olympic medalist from 1976 named Hanni Wenzel.
I looked at every celebrity,
I like that.
actor, musician, and athlete just because I thought that would be it, and then politician, and I didn't see any name that rang a bell with.
You know what they're
with me.
known for? You know what they are? Excuse me. The world leader in production of. Do you know?
I don't.
Dentures.
Dentures. Okay.
And frozen pizza.
It was very.
Dentures.
I remember it when I was on Wall Street. Did I mention I was on Wall Street? I was on Wall Street. UBS when they had asked to open up like UBS's books, and somebody can correct me on this. I think UBS went, and when they opened up their books, they had like 1,000 accounts that were able to be looked at. Then they had like another 13,000 accounts in Liechtenstein. Is it Liechtenstein? Stein.
I'm sure locals
Yeah.
call it something else.
All right, let's get back to 2025. So Liechtenstein makes gay marriage legal. We got the wildfires. We got the Trump thing. We got.
Where is it? What's it
It's
next
like
to that?
finding fucking.
Oh,
it's like finding Vatican City. You know what, John? Much like in real life, where I cannot help you find a G spot, you're going to have to go and find where fucking
Southwest of
Liechtenstein is
southwest
by
of
yourself.
Oh, it's in
Switzerland.
Europe.
Yes.
Yeah, it's in Europe, right
Why
above
didn't
the
you say
boot.
that?
Southwest of Switzerland, right above Italy.
So so the boot is Italy, right? Like a woman.
So it's in Switzerland.
It's
okay.
on the
So it's basically in Switzerland.
yes. It's on the
Oh, it's right near Zurich.
yes.
Okay.
Well, why
It's-
didn't you say that?
Yeah.
I don't want to say that. Well, I don't want to say anything
That's
about
actually going to be near the 2026 Winter Olympics.
it. Okay. Oh, where's that?
Northern Italy and Milan, like home base Milan, but all over the place.
Yeah, and you can get to Milan easily from
Yeah.
Liechtenstein, or you can get to
By the way, how many square miles did you say
Lucerne,
Brooklyn
Zurich, Innsbruck. What's that?
had? How many square miles did you say Brooklyn had?
I don't know.
Don't look it up.
Yeah, I hear Innsbruck is gorgeous. Like you can take a train.
I said Brooklyn has between like 65 and 70 square miles.
97.
97. Okay. Liechtenstein has 62. Let's get off of it. 15 people were killed, including the perpetrator, and 35 others are injured during a vehicle ramming and shooting attack in New Orleans. This is still what's going on in 2025. Justin Trudeau announced his resignation as Prime Minister of Canada after 9 years in office. 9 years.
Yes, I heard that.
Years in
9 years
office.
in
It's
office.
all those 97 square miles you can live
Yeah,
in.
a 7.1 magnitude earthquake struck southwest China, killing at least 126 people and injuring 300 more. 98 people are killed in a fuel tanker explosion in northern Nigeria. Thailand became the 30th country and the first in Southeastern Asia to legalize same-sex marriage. I don't know why I'm a big fan of same-sex marriage in this podcast.
I think it's just a
because-
milestone for people, and it's nice to see people
I
accepting
wonder if
others.
it's just a source that's finally getting around to reporting.
I don't know what it is, John, but I think people are starting to like florists aren't doing enough business around the
maybe.
world.
Yeah.
So they're like, how do we open it up? Let's start making flower arrangement for gay weddings.
Wait, are you talking about how like bodegas do reopenings, like grand openings, but they're
Absolute.
not actually grand openings?
Or we walked into a florist before we had gotten married, said, listen, we're going to have a huge party, 350 people. We're going to need all this kind of stuff. And the person says, okay, the quote for that is $5,000. ooh, that's a lot for flowers, but whatever. And they said, what is the exact occasion? I said, oh, it's actually our wedding. They're like, oh, wedding? It's $10,000. Like there's an automatic markup. So if you get to do that with people who are
Yes, but when
traditionally...
did we get married? What holiday?
Oh, and then when is it going to be? It's going to be Mother's Day weekend. We got married on the Saturday of Mother's Day weekend. It's going to be 20
I don't
grand.
recommend that.
Yeah. They trying to find fucking roses for a wedding on Mother's Day weekend. It's like trying to find fucking blood diamonds.
Didn't they try to push lemons on us?
They try to make us have lemons on every table instead of roses. So my point is that except for gay people who are looking to get married, 2025 has already given us a lot to talk about.
I felt my first earthquake.
You felt your first earthquake? You're welcome. Oh, the one in Jersey? Yes, you did.
Yes.
And
You're like, no, that was just somebody down the block hammering something.
yeah.
We got a shitty answer on the drones.
We got a
Your
shitty answer on the drones. No, yeah,
But
I don't buy that.
Just to show you how big of a year this is, and everybody,
30 days.
Everybody, how big of a month this is, excuse me.
Tomorrow.
But how big of a month this is, we're casually coming in here to record this on the 30th.
Yeah, tomorrow's the last day.
Thursday, the 30th of January. And last night we had just an absolute heartbreak of a tragedy with this plane crash.
Yeah.
Correct.
And like, again, if I was to do the twisted history of 2025, I have enough for an episode right now.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not even out of the first month.
Well, it makes it feel like we're breaking news. Like we ran into the studio today and we're like, all right, guys.
Right.
Like there's just so much twisted history now that we have to record.
Yeah.
So I'm
It's
not
like-
sure how to handle it, John, because like we were talking about, we joke around a lot about John having an affinity towards plane crashes, and obviously we
And
do
fires.
it
We haven't done
in
fires yet.
100% jest. We do it in 100% jest. John is not, a weirdo. Oh, he's a weirdo, but he's not a weirdo for that reason. So I all of a sudden looked up a quick thing because we had all this source material ready. Plane crashes in 1925, and there were a bunch. Right, I mean, obviously because technology wasn't there, and there were a bunch. I don't feel like running down and going tit for tat with it. I'm going to try and do a little tit for tat throughout the rest of this podcast.
Why do you think they were crashing? They can't fly.
Yes, yeah. So I won't try to do this because the tragedy is so the wound is so fresh, particularly for these people. Like we don't even know. The names of the victims and stuff like that for, benefit of the families and whatnot. Because, again, it just happened last night.
It's heartbreaking.
And that death toll is at 67, I believe, right?
I believe it's 63. I believe
Wasn't there 60 plus 4 plus 3?
60 people. I believe there's 60 people on the plane. And
Plus
then 3
4 crew.
people.
Plus 4 crew for 60.
Oh, I thought it was a total of.
No,
I don't
think
know.
it's
I'll
67.
find out.
So we're talking about 67 people being wiped out. And now, as they're going through the icy Potomac trying to get black boxes and obviously retrieving bodies, we wish everybody the best, but I won't get too much into it now. As I'm starting to talk about it, this is a fucking fresh wound, but it's about to become unfortunate history. I won't
first time since 2009.
So you were
I think.
saying you'd sent me the thing. We haven't seen a domestic airplane
Crash
like this since
Yeah.
Buffalo.
We've obviously seen the international Malaysia. That was a big one.
Uh-huh.
The missing planes that have been. There's several of them at this point.
Right.
But yeah, just domestic takeoff, landing, crash.
It was heartbreaking. What I'm reading of so far is that the plane was carrying 64 people, and that there were
3 in the chopper.
4 in the chopper.
So
it's 64.
the last fatal crash involving a U.S. commercial airline occurred in 2009 near Buffalo, New York. I think.
No, I believe that's
Yeah,
right because
yeah.
the news was saying we haven't seen anything like
There was
this.
one that was similar, but that was the one that I remember.
Yeah, 19 years I think they said.
15
No,
15
15
years, I
years.
thought, yeah.
Yeah, so 2009 makes sense as far as the math goes.
There was a crazy story about that. I'll pull it up, but go ahead.
Yeah. But so the whole excuse me. So the whole idea behind this podcast is once again to try and provide a little bit of perspective, right? A little bit of perspective on no matter how tough 2025 has been for some people or how joyous it's been for other people, right? I mean, some people are having a great fucking 2025. Let's see how it was if we were in this same situation 100 years ago, right? And that's the whole idea behind this podcast
I wish
right
I had
now.
a sound effect for that.
Yeah.
Right?
And we've done, of course, one of our best podcasts was the first 20 years of 1918. Did we call it, or 1920?
We did 1920.
Yeah, the first 20 years of the century.
Yes. Yeah.
Turn
we
of the
did.
century.
We did the turn of the century, and I think that this one's kind of interesting because 1925 doesn't really jump out to a lot of people as one of those years. Like when you think of like 1939.
Well, or it's after World War I, before 29 crash.
Yeah.
Right.
So everyone's like, well, I know it throws of prohibition and we're going into the Great Depression. We're in between World War I and World War II, trying to give you some sort of deal. But we're not like there. And my point is today I'm going to tell you we are there. It's something. When people talk about Donald Trump, this isn't a political podcast by any stretch of the imagination. I love to make fun of both sides.
We did a whole podcast after he
exactly.
the assassination attempt.
Yeah.
But
I'm glad we did.
I love to make fun of everybody. But if you want to name any kind of murderous dictator that we've ever spoken about, there's a good chance that Trump was compared to him, right? Like it's so easy to call. It's like a default thing for people to call you a Nazi nowadays. Which is fucking
Throw
stupid.
up your hand and it's like, you are.
Oh, right. Yeah, the whole deal. And it's fucking stupid. But one of the guys that Trump is often compared to, outside of the big guy, Adolf Hitler, that fucking iconic scumbag, is Benito Mussolini. So let's start with him. Let's start with fucking Mussolini because 1925 was the year of the Mussolini. By the way, happy Chinese New Year to everybody.
Happy New Year.
Bless you. The year of the snake, right?
The year of the snake.
The snake, yes. We learned that it was.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, I was talking Big Bang.
You sound a little stuffed
I'm
up.
a little bit congested.
Yeah.
I was with Big Bang Zhang last week.
Yeah? How's he doing?
So
him.
for people who don't know, there's a boxer. His name is Zhang Zhilei. He's a
Sweetheart.
fucking mountain.
He's the man. He's great, too.
He is great.
He eclipses me. He's the biggest. He's the Great Wall of fucking China. He makes me look tiny, and he's the nicest guy in the world.
Shout out to the Lane
He's
brothers.
a great boxer, too. He's had a great couple years.
I just wish there was a
More than
time machine that could that dial it back because he spent so much time fighting in the Olympics and for his country. Now he's a 41-year-old heavyweight that throws bombs with his right hand, but he's got no gas tank. Like he's got some issues with and sometimes that doesn't come into play because he throws thudding punches. But Big Bang Zhang is a friend of mine, so I was in London doing some stuff before this new DAZN card that's hitting in February. The best card that I've ever seen for Baturviev versus Bivol Part 2. I'm going to say that again for boxing fans out here who casually drifted in Twisted History. If you're not watching that card, I think on February 22nd,
Yes.
you're not a boxing fan. Everybody's on that fucking card. Turkey Al-Sheikh is paying fucking checks, and they are not bouncing. And then Canelo's going to fight fucking Crawford. There's so much shit going on. But anyway, I got to talk to a little bit to Big Bang Zhang, and he was telling me about the year of the snake and whatnot. And he says hello, John.
He's promoted by the Lane brothers.
Terry and Tommy, yeah.
Yep.
Mills Lane's kids. Terry and Tommy, two great fucking guys. Benito Mussolini. Names very recognizable for just about anybody listening to this podcast.
Definitely.
Everybody knows about Mussolini. But I would tell you, if I said Hitler, Stalin, and Mussolini, I think more people know a lot about Hitler, something about Stalin. Very few people know a lot about Benito Mussolini. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say you could do one of those, like, what is his, where was he born? Where, and
Yes.
you would
Right.
get a lot of different answers.
And,
I know enough about him. I don't know what he looks like.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Me. Without glasses and without...
A little tanner.
He had a huge head. Yeah, he was a little bit tanner.
A little more
You're absolutely
Italian.
Right. No beard,
So
bald
I'm going to
guy,
find this guy
huge
hot when
head.
I see him. Let's see.
No, he wasn't a
let's
hottie.
see.
I would say he looked
Thank you for
more
that.
like the Russian guy,
Oh.
but fatter.
He
Right?
looks like George C. Scott.
Yeah,
he's got a George C.
Or doesn't
Scott
he
look to him.
like
He looks like Patton.
the Russian guy, but fatter, right? Isn't that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
can see that.
Right?
The
Who
Russian.
did you say?
Stalin,
He looks
Stalin,
like
Stalin, but fatter.
No, not Stalin.
Or
do
who's
you
the
think
guy
he
during
looks
World War II? I'm sorry, I'm blanking on it.
No, Stalin during World War II.
Okay.
But you're talking about...
Stalin was
but
a thin
Stalin
guy.
had that
Stalin
cool...
was a thin guy. Yeah.
Stalin had that cool black hair. I can't believe we're talking about these guys like that. Cool. Like we're talking about Timothy Chalamet. But yeah, Joseph
Well,
Stalin...
he's been portrayed
Wow.
in films.
They say that. You know who he's most compared to?
Who? The guy from the Wire? No, not the Commish?
The commish?
Roger
It was-
Goodell.
No, the
You're talking
dude from
about
the
the guy
Commish,
that
the
plays
show.
Thing?
What was the show? The Commish.
The guy that plays Thing?
Yeah. Wasn't
can't
that the
think of his name.
Commish?
I don't know. But they...
The show? You didn't watch that fuck? Am I crazy?
Coach?
No, with the dude with the
The
bald
Commish?
head.
What?
Oh, is that
HBO,
I don't know. Did
Hulu,
I didn't
Netflix?
watch that with you. You're talking about him, Michael Chiklis.
Michael Chiklis?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, The Shield.
Okay.
The Shield.
The Shield. He
Yes.
was in The Shield.
was
We
on The
watched all.
Commish.
I've never watched The
Hank
Commish.
from.
But he is the
Hank
commish.
from
You're
yeah.
right.
Yes, he was also the
Great
Commish.
show.
Yeah.
No, Pope John
Jesus,
Paul II.
what were you saying?
Pope John Paul II.
You were convinced. And
I was convinced that I saw The Commiss. I never saw an episode of The Commiss.
I've never.
It's gone off
watched
the
it.
rails. Where the fuck is Vibbs?
I was close with
Vibbs needs to put a tent on the
Coach.
circus. Yeah.
They said that the Vatican got slammed for putting up a statue of Pope John Paul II because it looked too much like Benito Mussolini.
Okay, I can see that. He's very popish looking. So listen,
was Roman.
if you know Mussolini,
Excuse
right?
me, Polish.
Hitler is what the Batmobile. Mussolini lost his weenie. Now he cannot work. Like that was a fucking kid song when I was a kid, right? Whistle
100
while you
years ago,
work.
1925.
Yeah, whistle while you work. Hitler is a jerk. Mussolini lost his weenie. Now he cannot work. You didn't hear that when you were a fucking kid?
Thank God.
Damn it, I'm fucking old. So Benito Mussolini was the prime minister of Italy beginning in 1922. This is the Twisted History 1925 large. Why are you saying that? On January 3rd, very fresh into that new year, 1925, he decided he no longer was going to be prime minister of Italy. He gave a pivotal speech in the Italian Chamber of Deputies, which is regarded by historians as the beginning of his dictatorship. So he went on January 3rd, 1925, from being the prime minister of Italy to giving himself the title of Il Duce. Il Duce. So he became the dictator, the leader. Il Duce, I believe, means the leader.
Correct.
Of Italy. We don't talk enough about him on this podcast, so here's the bare bones for those who recognize the name, but they don't really know the man. And maybe we'll do a twisted history of Benito Mussolini because he did a lot of shit. First off, he was expelled from school at the age of 10 for stabbing another student. And it wasn't the first time he had stabbed a student. Another little tidbit, he had an exceptionally large head, which I was talking about. I used to call him Big Head.
Big Head.
He began his political life as a committed socialist, but during World War I, he renounced socialism and adopted fascism. I really would like to put a multiple choice test in front of a lot of people, particularly protesters, and see if they know the difference between socialism, fascism, communism. You know what I mean? Like, it's so easy to call people, I like socialism, I think he's a fascist, this is a capitalist. People don't know what the fuck they're talking about. As I said above, he ruled Italy from 1922 to 1925 as prime minister, and then from 25 until 43 as El Douchebag, the fascist dictator. He organized a paramilitary unit known as the Black Shirts. They were bad guys who terrorized political opponents and helped increase his fascist influence. His takeover of Italy was the inspiration for a guy named Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party in Germany. In May of 1939, Mussolini signed a Pact of Steel, the Pact of Steel with Hitler. The pact committed Italy to provide military and economic support to Germany in the event of war, and by coincidence, World War II began in September of 1939. So in May, he signs a deal with Hitler. Italy gets off very, very cleanly.
Oh, they fly
in
under
talks
the radar.
from World
big
War
time.
II.
Yes, they do.
Italy gets off extremely cleanly, and I think the reason is because everyone loves chicken parm, everyone loves gnocchis,
what is this?
everyone
What's
loves
the
fucking
side talk?
Sophia Loren, everybody loves a nice fucking Britannia Amarone. You know what I'm saying?
Like you don't love Italians.
Yeah, everyone wants to go to Positano. They want to, you know what I mean? Oh, lemon
Amalfi
trees, let's do
Coast.
some shit. So they get away with it, John.
Like Como.
Yeah, well, in the whole Cold War, they were left out of for the most part. So,
You know, I said this last night. I was in an old age home, not an old age home, in one of these homes visiting my mother-in-law, Annie's mother. And we were around a table with people who are older. And I was asking questions. I said, do you guys know what a group of lions is called? Oh, one person said a pride. You know, oh, what a group of geese, a flock. All these kind of things. I went through the whole thing. I was like, you know what a group of guinea pigs is called? And they said, I don't know. And I said, Italy. And I got a huge roaring laugh from
Thank
the
God,
old
because
folks.
my mom is all Italian, like old school Italian, and you're lucky. You could have gone in one of two ways.
I get canceled for that. I hope you leave this in.
I honestly don't think it's funny enough. You guys, yeah.
It's not. It's
It's
not
just-
funny to get
I was
canceled.
dying.
But I
I thought it was so
I was
funny.
looking for something, and it was very funny in that type of thing. Please don't use that. I was just using it with old people with dementia. Right?
Hopefully, they'll forget where they heard it.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. After losing the war, Mussolini was forced to resign. On July 25th, 1943, he was arrested, but the German commandos rescued him in something called the Grand Sasso Raid, which I went over once. It was like this, I think there was like, they parachuted into like this resort in the Alps where they were holding Mussolini. It was like a real Mission Impossible type fucking thing.
Oh, yeah,
where
we
they
talked
pulled
about
him
it
out
with
of
the
Gran
car.
Sasso. Yes.
Yes.
That was the Gran Sasso raid. So
wasn't he with the woman?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And by the way, he's with the woman all the way till the end.
All the way to the end. She
Well,
was ride or
which
die.
He had a few women, but
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, he was a coxman. I don't think he. Yeah. So he was with his mistress. So
That's where the nickname came from.
yeah. So Gran Sasso raid gets him out of essentially prison after they lost World War II. But later on, him and his mistress, whose name was Claretta Petacci, they were executed on April 28th, 1945 in Mezzegra, Italy. More specifically, he tried to sneak over the Swiss border wearing a German military overcoat and helmet, but an Italian partisan recognized him and shouted, and this is not made up, John, "We got big head." That's what they fucking said.
Yeah.
We got it a bigger head, or whatever the fuck it was. And Mussolini was executed the following day in Italy, and his corpse was strung upside down in Milan Square. I'll be even more specific with that. Him and his mistress, who had gigantic tits.
Sloppy ones,
They were
right?
shot.
So we've heard.
And after the corpses were kicked and spat upon, their bodies were hung upside down from the roof of some fucking service station, like that scene from Sisu, and
Right.
stoned from below by civilians. Not too long after, a fascist loyalist whose name was Achille Starace, perhaps Starace, but I don't need to give this guy any fucking respect. So Achille Starace was captured and sentenced to death, was taken to that town square, shown the body of Mussolini. He saluted the fucking body. Then he was shot and strung up next to Mussolini and his whore girlfriend. We could do multiple episodes on this scumbag, but just know that he officially became the fascist dictator of Italy on January 3rd, 1925. And because of the scale of the Nazi Empire, right, they were more successful. Because of the scale of the Nazi Empire, it's often forgotten that politically, Mussolini had achieved almost everything that Hitler wanted to over a decade before Hitler was able to. He didn't build ovens, he didn't do that, I know. But what he wanted to do, become this fascist dictator, which is what Hitler wanted to do, Mussolini did it first.
He did. And
So
they
know
died-
that.
They
And
died 2 days apart.
And the whole and they died 2 days, which I didn't know.
Right.
I didn't know that these two scumbags, these two historical teaspoons of cum, died 2 days
They
apart.
were 5 years. They were 5 years apart in age. 10
Yeah.
years professionally, but they died 2 days. Yeah,
So-
he died, Mussolini died 2 days before Hitler.
So for people with septum piercings who are crying into their fucking webcams about, the inauguration and whatnot, so your Trump is Mussolini 100 years ago. That's not an apples to apples comparison.
is not.
I'm just saying that if you wanted to see something that reverberated through the world as somebody took power that was very opinionated, we have Trump this year, and Mussolini came to power in 1925. Mussolini was much worse. And Benito wasn't the only, I call him Benito. Benny, wasn't the only person to come to power in 1925. In 1924, just 1 year prior, there was a young man and a small-time member of the Carlissimo mob named Alphonse Gabriel Capone. He was responsible for the murder of some guy named Joe Howard in retribution for Howard's earlier assault on one of Capone's friends, and an aggressive prosecutor named William McSwiggan, which is a great name for an Irish prosecutor. William McSwiggan. He attempted to, but failed to indict Capone when the eyewitnesses, conveniently fearing harm, lost their nerve and denied remembering the incident. Mob boss Johnny Torrio eventually made Capone his right-hand man until his retirement in 1925 after a failed assassination attempt on Torrio. Torrio says, "I'm fucking out of here." So because of that, in 1925, Torrio left and Al Capone was promoted to the leader of the Carlissimo mob, which is known from then on as the Capone mob. Benito Mussolini becomes dictator of fucking Italy in 1925. Also in 1925, Al Capone rises to power. And he expanded the outfit, as he referred to his underworld
I love
organization.
that. That's a great name.
He went on to become one of America's leading mobster. I mean, the history of America, you want to say a mobster that's recognizable just by name, and you say John Gotti, I agree. You say Al Capone, I agree especially. The guy was fucking huge. John, have you ever seen the movie The Outfit?
I've not seen the movie yet.
Highly
Ooh,
recommend it.
Great movie.
Is it a Capone movie?
No.
No.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with Al Capone at all. But when Annie had said how much she liked the name, the outfit just now for the
Yeah.
first time, it immediately brought me to that. God, I wish I can remember the guy's name.
I'll find it for you.
What's it about?
So
it's excellent.
it's about like it was shot around that time, like in the 20s. And there's a guy. You don't know what his
name
origins.
is Mark Rylance. the
Mark
actor.
Rylance.
Oh, yeah.
Mark Rylance.
From Bridge of Spies.
Yes.
Yes.
And so he is a tailor. He's a tailor in, somewhere in maybe Chicago.
Like
He's got a huge presence, but man, is he small.
It's like a 90s movie?
I'm bigger than that guy.
No, it's about 3 years old.
Oh, okay.
It's excellent, John. It's shot in one room.
Came out in 2022.
Yeah. It's very, very good.
Check it out.
Yeah. Back to Al Capone. His wealth in 1927, so he became mob boss in 25. By 1927, it was estimated at close to $100 million. And on October 17th, 1931, Capone was convicted of income tax evasion, sentenced to 11 years in prison. We all know this because we all watch The Untouchables.
You know what's cool about Al Capone and
No.
his family? They were very big distributors back in in the day, and they are the reason. Well, it's one story. There's so many stories that they're the reason that there are expiration dates on milk bottles. Him and his brother Ralph, who was also nicknamed
Wait a second.
Bottles.
So let me slow you down here.
Yes,
because
sir.
I don't. So I'm talking about Al Capone, worth $100 million in 1927 after becoming a mob boss in 1925.
Yep.
Goes to prison for 11 years for tax evasion. I haven't finished what had happened to him ultimately. You're saying Al Capone is the reason that there are expiration dates on milk bottles.
Correct. It's either him or his brother Ralph. His brother's Ralph, probably his brother Ralph, because his nickname was Bottles.
Oh.
That was But back then, people used to live on farms, and they knew the farmer that would bottle
Right.
their milk and deliver it. But then they moved into cities like Chicago, and it was just dropped off in the middle of the night by some random guy. You didn't know who he was, where he came from, and one of their friends, one of Ralph's friends or one of Al's friends, their kid got really sick, and they, figured it came from like turned milk. So they said that from that day forward, you had to put in either an expiration date or a sell-by date, just so that people would know how long the milk has been out, so that they couldn't get sick from
That's
it.
fascinating.
Pretty cool, right?
Thank you, Capone brothers.
Right?
Murderous scumbags.
They lobbied for dating on milk jars. So.
Also, similar to koalas, that he died of syphilis.
Correct.
1931, he goes to prison for 11 years. They let him out early in 1939, so he only did 8 of an 11-year stretch. He moved back to Miami with his wife, where he slowly rotted away from syphilis until a fatal heart attack in 1947.
Or chlamydia, right? They have chlamydia too.
I think he might have had.
Koalas.
Was that wrong?
You know what?
Wait, isn't that the symptom from it, or is it?
Oh,
Are they related?
I
right?
could tell you right now,
Am I
you
wrong?
could blame the fucking Wuhan virus on koalas, and I would nod my head. I hate those fucking things. That's another movie that I would say that people shouldn't watch. Capone, starring
Yeah.
Tom Hardy.
It's
I thought it was
forgettable.
What a
awful.
terrible movie that was.
Fucking awful.
Yeah.
All right, so Al Capone comes to power in 1925. Benito Mussolini comes to power. What else happened 100
Milk
years ago?
dates.
Locally, New York City in 1925 officially became the largest city in the world, taking that lead from, where would you think in 1925? What do you think the biggest city in the world was before New York?
London.
London, yeah.
Definitely.
Suck on that, fucking English, right? 1925, it's over, right? We did it. We spoke about this in the Twisted History of Indiana in March of 1925. I brought this up just because of the wildfires, right? Which seem to be a natural disaster for the most part.
This
Even
is
though
a
there's
wild
some
story, by the
demented
way.
fucking people who are filling like. Remember Scotty was telling, or somebody was telling me that they're filling sewer things up with gasoline, trying to keep these fires going or something.
Yeah, it was hard to
Domestic
verify
terrorism.
that.
Yeah, it was tough, right?
Yeah.
Like people have been on social media beating up other people who seem to be starting fires in and around.
Right.
Yeah.
And, we don't condone violence, but kind of condone that, right? So
And when you hear from people who actually live there, it's
crazy.
The reporting is very different.
So as bad as it is in California, and we're not downplaying a single thing that's going on right now in 2025, but we're just trying to show you that there is some sort of, I don't know, repetition to what had happened almost 100 years ago. In March of 1925, the tri-state tornado struck the Midwestern states of Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana. What was wild about this one is that the locals in those states were completely surprised since the weather forecast had not said a word about an imminent tornado. In fact, forecasters had been banned mentioning it because they wanted to avoid creating a panic in the population. So people kind of knew that this was coming. Forecasters did. They didn't say anything about it. They didn't know it was going to be as big as it was, and people got fucked as a result.
Mm-hmm.
I might sneeze again.
Oh, no.
In all, at least 751 men, women, and children were killed. 751.
How many?
751 people were killed in the largest. So 751 men, women, and children were killed. More than 2,300 were injured, making it the deadliest tornado outbreak in U.S. history. Mm-hmm. It left behind a 219-mile-long track as it crossed from southeastern Missouri through southern Illinois and then into southwestern Indiana, and that track is the longest ever recorded. Part of the reason that track, meaning that it tore through 200, imagine that, just tearing through 220 miles.
It was like the movie that we saw. Remember we went and saw that when we were down by you?
I love that movie.
Which one?
Yeah, that was me. Yeah.
Right? We
I
saw
love
the
that movie.
tornado
Twisters.
movie.
Oh, Twisters. Yeah. So this was one of those ones. So we have wildfires and perhaps mudslides, by the way, right? That's what they say is coming up next there in 2025. But they had the deadliest tornado ever. And like John's like, are you sure that fucking... Yes, 751 men, women, and children wiped out by the tri-state tornado.
Like the one in Alabama a few years ago was bad, but nowhere near that, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's so it's bad. And this was all 1925. This is in March of 1925. So not an easy start to the year. What else happened in that year? Is there anything that might compare to the growth of AI that we see in 2025? Like, I don't know now. I was telling Annie last night, at a certain time in the evening, my algorithm for, I think maybe Instagram Reels.
It's kind of funny the way that flips.
Not TikTok and not Twitter. I'm unfortunately on social media a lot because we have to for our job. And it's the fucking dregs of society. I know. I try to keep it light. There's an algorithm that flips over at night. By the time I get to bed and start doing Wordle next to you,
I can look over his shoulder, which I don't, because I just don't.
I show you. It turns into all tits.
It goes from Frenchies to straight up boobs.
It's like, all French bulldogs, recipes, certain other things. Oh, outdoor survival for some reason. You know that one guy who builds the tents and shit? All day, John. I get that all day. I love it. There's this one guy with glasses. He's like a geeky dude. He goes out and like digs into snow. All this shit. You know, obviously cooking shows, big. Restaurants, including my own videos, big for me. At maybe 10 o'clock at night, it's all tits. And I will tell you right now, I can't tell if they're AI generated.
Really?
There are some girls, I'll show you tonight.
They're only real if you can touch them.
And so Annie's like, well, you must be looking at them. And I'm like, of course. Like, I look, like all of a sudden I see something.
Only because you asked.
It looks like a high-powered
cartoon.
So I don't know. I think that we're on the precipice, and I'm sure that Glennie's at the forefront of this, and people who are younger than me would confirm or deny, where these people who are making a lot of money on OnlyFans, they're done. Because we can now make AI that looks exactly like it, and you can do whatever you want with these girls with little to no scarring, either mental or physical, right?
Right.
Because I can program my AI girl to, you know, show me an image of her with a Heineken bottle stuck up her ass, and everything's cool because it's fucking AI. You ask your wife to do it, all of a sudden she doesn't talk to me for 2 days. You know what I mean? So AI is sort of taking over in places where it wasn't. So what was going on in 1925 that might have been something similar, right? I'm trying to do apples to apples here. Glad you asked. You know how somebody inevitably, when something gets beheaded, particularly chickens, somebody will mention how the human head can stay alive for a minute after it's removed from the body. A chicken can run around.
I thought you were going to go to like woods porn again.
No.
You went on a totally different.
We had a chameleon or a fucking lizard named Mr. Dobalina, and
Mr. Bob Dobalino.
And Bridget squirmed when I put him on her, and when she did that, her feet rubbed together. And her heel ripped the fucking lizard's tail off.
It was...
She freaked out.
Traumatizing.
And she felt so bad. I took the lizard. I put him back in his fucking terrarium, whatever. I put the tail on the thing just to get away from her. And the tail convulsed for probably 5 or 6 minutes.
It was disgusting.
It was crazy. I had the video. I'll give you the video. And it's fascinating, right? It's fascinating to see something dead moving. So they can do all this shit. talk about chickens without heads and, Mr. Dobolina's tail and all that stuff, because the original guy to do it was Dr. Sergei Bryukh-Honenko. I've spoke about him before. I think I'm just going to call him Sergei Bryukh because it's tough to go from Bryukh to Honenko anymore, so I might go back and forth. But Sergei Bryukhenko made a severed dog's head live and even chew for a live studio audience in 1925. Bryukhenko is famous for a slightly less circusy perspective. He invented one of the first primitive heart-lung machines of all time. The ones that keep you alive during open heart surgery. That's because of him. So if you look him up, you'll have to slog through a number of articles praising all those gifts to medical science before you start to run into the headline, Russian who raised the dead. Then you'll learn that in a much more circusy way, he's also famous for using that same heart-lung machine in 1925 to keep a dog head alive for 100 minutes, over an hour and a half, even though it was severed from its body. Ugh. By 1929, with funding from the People's Commissariat for the Protection of Health, the highest agent responsible for medical research in the USSR, he was able to stretch that to 3.5 hours with a dead dog head. A queer-looking affair made of glass and rubber tubing is what the quote was, kept the dog's head alive for 3.5 hours. Who the fuck's cutting heads off dogs for this, by the way?
A lot of scientists are weird. How about that guy, Lavoisier? Remember he was beheaded for tax evasion and fraud, but he was like a scientist, and he told his assistant, once they behead me, make sure you see how many times I'll try to blink my eyes as many times as I can, and you just write it down so it goes in my history.
Where the fuck was Sarah McLachlan in 1925? Making us feel bad about spraying deodorant in a rabbit's eyes. These Russians were cutting the heads off dogs and then keeping them alive for 3.5 hours. By the way,
sending them to space.
He even stimulated the jaws of the dead animal.
Yeah. Ugh.
Allowing it to kind of eat, and the crowd drew back when this masticated remains of a piece of cheese slid down the severed esophagus of a fucking labradoodle and then fell into the floor because there was no body there.
Yeah.
People lined up. John, it was fucking huge. It was like AI porn.
Yeah.
Right? What's the difference between me asking, Susie.0 put a Heineken bottle up. I don't know why I keep doing the Heineken bottle thing. Versus trying
Apparently
to watch.
I'm going to have an interesting evening.
Yeah, I apologize. On hearing of the invention, the playwright George Bernard Shaw had said, I'm greatly tempted to have my head cut off so that I may continue to dictate plays and books independent of any illness without having to dress and undress or eat or do anything at all but produce masterpieces of dramatic art and literature.
I think you got to do this in Brooklyn accent.
I should do the whole fucking thing. So where am I going with this? I think it's obvious.
You got to try this.
Yeah. You got to try this. But where do you go? And I'm going to ask the crowd. So if you start, it's like serial killers. You start masturbating to roadkill, and pretty soon you start killing hookers. It's just the natural way.
Yes.
Right?
Unfortunately.
You start reanimating dead dogs. Where do you think that leads to? Can you really stop with just dogs?
Walt Disney.
You cannot. In 1934, Bryukh-Honenko attempted to revive a man who committed suicide. Just 3 hours after the man had hung himself, the doctor slit open an artery, right, and connected them to this blood pump. He slit open an artery and a vein, right, to pump in and take out. Connected both sides to this blood pump, right? That makes sense? And the blood pump was called the autojector. The machine steadily drew dead cold blood from the corpse and returned it with warm and rich with oxygen blood. For several hours, the team waited, listening to the whir of the autojector as the dead man's body slowly warmed up. Then a faint sound joined them in the room, which is a fucking heartbeat. Then a death rattle gurgled from the man's throat. The man's eyelids fluttered open. He stared at the doctors around him. But the reanimation lasted just 2 minutes. The experimenters were unbearably horrified at what they had done, immediately switched off the pumps, allowing the patient to slip back into death. After that, Bryukh-Honenko left his experiments to just the dogs. And if you don't believe me, that they reanimated something a la Dr. Frankenstein, right? I beg you, right? If you just like seeing dead dogs chew on cheese. His work was captured on camera in the 1940 film Experiments in the Revival of Organs. So we have AI replacing our porn right now. We had Dr. Sergei Bryohonkonenko playing Dr. Frankenstein, 1925.
Right.
Okay? Apples to apples? Not really, but it is. No. What else happened in 1925? There was a guy named Roy W. Allen.
I like this story.
Yeah. He opened up a root beer stand in Lodi, California in 1919. His last name is Allen, which starts with an A. Allen had purchased his root beer recipe from a pharmacist and decided to start selling the drink on a hot summer day that happened to coincide with a citywide party celebrating the homecoming of local World War I heroes. Again, this was 1919. Allen's root beer was a hit, and a couple of years later, he partnered with a former employee named Frank Wright, whose last name starts with a W, to open additional root beer stands in the area. Around this time, Allen, A, and Wright coined the name A&W, which uses the first letters. As their success continued, Allen and Wright decided to sell A&W franchises in what year? 1925. Woo! So even without the burgers and the hot dogs, the cheese curds that they have there, other typical fast food fare, which was added to the menu later on, in 1925, A&W became the oldest fast food chain in the world. Okay? So we had fast food, and now we got nothing but fucking fast food. You know what else was founded in 1925? Let's talk about a group that was founded in 1925. The Schutzstaffel.
Schutzstaffel.
That's German for protective echelon. It's the group that initially served as Hitler's personal bodyguards, later became one of the most powerful and feared organizations in all of Nazi Germany. Heinrich Himmler, a fervent anti-Semite, just like Hitler, became the head of the Schutzstaffel, which they had shortened to something called the SS, right? The Thunderbolts that we know,
Yes,
right?
sir.
The lightning bolts that we know,
Yep.
the SS. So that started in 1925, the SS. By 1929, they expanded the group's role and size. Recruits who had to prove none of their ancestors were Jewish became part of a group that from the time of the Nazi Party's rise until the regime collapsed in 1945 was the foremost agency of security, mass surveillance, and state terrorism within Germany and Germany-occupied Europe. So, a very unhappy 100th anniversary to the SS. But that came to... And now again, we're after World War I here in 1925. And we're still 14 years away from World War II. So the SS started in 1925 and had 14 years to sort of really master their craft before they started a world war. Birthdays in 1925. Am I moving too quickly?
No.
I don't think so.
I mean, I don't think so, but...
John Delorean. John, I'm going to say that name out loud. I already know. And do you know who John Delorean was?
I'm reading it right now in front of me. Yeah.
Yeah, he's the car guy. My buddy, Paul Mackin?
Paul Mackin, yeah.
Yeah,
Probably one of the most famous cars ever.
I think so. Back to the Future.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Back to the Future
Also,
car.
but they only made like...
Very few.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So.
Paul Mackin, who was bartender at O'Hara's when I used to work on the American Stock Exchange, a very close friend of myself and Annie's, even before we got married.
That's right.
Paulie was a great guy. He drove a DeLorean, and it was stainless steel. He used to clean it with a Brillo pad. Is that fucking wild?
Yeah.
He used to wash it like a fucking cast iron pot.
The Cybertrucks.
I used to go, have a couple of beers, then I'd jump behind the stick and pour beers for guys at the bar, for hours, just kind of sober up and work the bar. Then I drive the DeLorean home for him.
Yeah.
Because we both lived in Bay Ridge.
Uh-huh.
Right. So John DeLorean was the guy. He was born on January 6, 1925.
You know how much the DeLorean went for in 1982?
Oh, I'm going to... like auction?
No, how much you buy one for?
In what year?
82.
Okay.
I think it was cheap. It was like... Or actually, I shouldn't say that. I don't know.
I'm trying to keep my...
I can't remember because it was valuable at some point.
52.3.
Okay. Yeah.
That's approachable.
That was probably huge in 1982.
Oh, it's huge,
right?
yeah.
I bet you they went for a couple
Wait a sec,
$100,000.
I said that's approachable. What would like a Ferrari go for back then?
A
Like,
Ferrari in
I think
$1982?
$100,000 at least.
Yeah, so that is kind of for a crazy affordable luxury car like a DeLorean.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it was unique. That's true. I don't know. With inflation, you're right. I guess
Particularly people with the whole Back to the Future thing. Like Back to the Future really put it back on the map for people.
Well, when it first came out, I think it wasn't too much fanfare, but I could be wrong.
A Ferrari in 1982 cost $62.2.
So it was less than a Ferrari, but close.
Wow.
Less than a Ferrari, but close.
That's crazy.
You could get all the bells and whistles and go up to 82.5, but those were all add-ons.
Really?
This guy,
Crazy, right? Like now
Is
people
that
now you see like
pre-Ferrari, maybe?
you see like 20-year-olds driving around in cars.
I actually wonder if it is.
Crazy. It's crazy.
But John Delorean, so what we're saying here, he was a car maker, worked with bigger car companies and whatnot, but he's basically known for the DeLorean for most people. I also remember him because in 1982, I know I was young, I was only 11, but I've known about this since then. He was caught in a cocaine smuggling ring. He was actually caught in a sting operation. He was trying to sell like 220 pounds of cocaine. He got off on all charges because he said he was entrapped by the policeman who orchestrated the sting, and he got away with it. He got away. Yeah, listen, it was a lot of coke, but 220 pounds of white. Is that unfucking believable? John DeLorean.
Not exactly Brittany Griner's amount.
That would do me Back to the Future. He died in 2008, but again, this is where we come full circle. Okay, boys and girls? In 1999, before he died in 2008, DeLorean declared personal bankruptcy after fighting some 40 legal cases following the collapse of DeLorean Motor Company. So he was forced to sell his 434-acre estate in Bedminster, New Jersey. Right?
Is that what is now?
The deal went down in 2000. Do you know who bought his 434-acre estate in Bedminster?
Oh, yes, you do. Think about it.
Trump?
Trump bought it and turned it into Trump National.
Yeah.
That's fucking wild.
He dropped like $40 million into it.
I think
he bought it cheap for $18 million.
Yeah,
and then he dropped $40 million into it to make it what it is.
Wow. I think a few New Jersey real estate, like golf, really private golf clubs are like that, where they were formerly something.
Huge estates.
Huge estates, and then got turned into...
You know why he went to jail? You know why he got caught?
What?
Because his neighbor saw him doing stuff.
Oh, okay.
And the neighbor was like a degenerate like smuggler who was convicted himself. He's like, I recognized all the signs. He was just like...
That's awesome. I try to have everyone just remember one thing if they can from each episode. We've already thrown out some doozies, but if Back to the Future ever comes on, you'll see a DeLorean. Make sure you tell somebody, isn't that guy who tried to buy 220 pounds of coke? No. And then when he sold it, and then it became Trump National. That's what I want you guys to kind of take away with it. Who else was born in 1925? I only got the guys who I think people will recognize, starting with Paul Newman. Everyone knows Paul Newman, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Paul Newman was a very handsome man.
He was. Well, they just put out a movie about him and his wife, right?
Yeah, but I think a lot of kids know him as a salad dressing guy.
Yeah,
Tomato
sauce and
You'll never know Cool Hand Luke or
Cars. He was.
He was the older.
He was the older
car.
I can't think of the car.
Coach Cassidy.
By the way, big time Jewish guy, Paul Newman. There's a picture of him. He was gorgeous eyes. There's a shirtless picture of him just wearing a Star of David.
Doc Hudson, that's who he was.
Doc Hudson, yeah. And he had to deal with like some anti-Semitism. I think the only action he saw when he was in the services was someone who used that K word that people call Jewish people sometimes, and it got pretty bloody. They used to call him like Paul Juman and stuff like that. But which is something that I just remembered it. But Paul Newman, hell of a guy. And I believe when you cut a check to a charity, sometimes you don't know where it goes, right? The Red Cross had a couple of bad headlines not too long after 9/11 and whatnot. Paul Newman, I believe 100% of the profits go to charity. He's dead. Paul Newman has passed away, right? Paul Newman's been dead a couple of years.
Yeah, I don't know when he's dead.
2018, I think.
Yeah, but the guy was a huge, first of all, he's a huge racing fan.
2008 he
and
died.
Huge humanitarian.
That was close.
Yeah.
I had an 8.
You were close. You had the 8.
Yeah. Twisted History Charities with Smitty.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
An angry one.
Oh, that was an angry one. You certainly was.
But in a good way. It was fun.
I loved it. So Paul Newman, born in 1925. John DeLorean, born in 1925. Yogi Berra, born in 1925.
Man of the quotes.
Yeah, but people know that he's the guy who's quoted more than William Shakespeare, and he's got some great quotes and all that stuff. But outside of the East Coast, where people are Yankee fans and stuff, I hope people don't reduce Yogi Berra because of the quotes to a joke. Because the guy played in the major leagues for 20 years. He played in 14 World Series, won 10 of them, right? He's a 15-time All-Star, won the American League MVP in 51, 54, and 55. And he was born on May 12th in 1925. John, I know you brushed
Johnny
it off.
Bench guy.
Oh, you're a Johnny Bench guy. I hear you. Johnny Carson was born in 1925. If you don't know who Johnny Carson is, that's a fucking shame too. Johnny Carson, by the way, was damn close to being a professional drummer. You ever seen him behind this drum set?
No.
Johnny Carson was
I love that.
very good a musician. The last appearance that Johnny Carson made on TV, he didn't say anything. I believe he went on Letterman's show maybe. And he went out there, he got a 20-minute standing ovation, and then walked off the stage. Yeah, Johnny Carson was the guy. Merv Griffin, huge when I was growing up. Nobody knows him, but if you watch Jeopardy, if you watch Wheel of Fortune,
Right.
you can thank Merv Griffin.
Yeah,
By the way, Merv
nobody knows
Griffin,
him.
billionaire with a B.
Yes.
Fucking billionaire with a B. Owns a lot of fucking owned a lot of hotels in and around Vegas and whatnot. Guy was a stud. Robert Kennedy was born in 1925. Not the guy with the gravelly voice. Obviously his dad.
He doesn't have kids, right?
I don't know. Sammy Davis Jr., who I'm going to do an episode on, because Sammy Davis Jr. was a fucking freak. But Sammy Davis Jr. was born in 1925. He was once kidnapped, forced to marry a black woman by the studio that he worked for when they found out he was dating a white actress. They fucking kidnapped him and made him marry a black person. And finally, no, I have a couple more birthdays, but one of them is a guy named Pol Pot. Polpot. So if we're going to talk about Stalin, we're going to talk about Hitler, we're going to talk about Benito Mussolini, let's talk a little bit about Pol Pot. Not a lot. Cambodia. He was the guy from Cambodia. He was a Stalinist dictator and the leader of a group called the Khmer Rouge. Khmer Rouge. Khmer Rouge. This scumbag oversaw mass atrocities and is widely believed to be one of the most brutal despots in modern world history. Between 1975, he was born in 25, between 1975 and 1979, Pol Pot perpetrated the Cambodian genocide, which we spoke about with Chief that one time. Swiss history genocide was a good one.
Yeah, at Killing Fields, I think is
Yep.
like about
Yeah.
Cambodia, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
1.5 to 2 million people died.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you, like when we're talking about the tri-state tornado and 700 some odd die, 1.5 to 2 million people died in this fucking genocide. Approximately 1/4 of Cambodia's population. Pol Pot was born in 1925, and I wish he wasn't. And then the final birthday, we're going to talk about a good guy, Johnny Lujack. Johnny Lujack. Notre Dame just lost the national championship to Ohio State, and it was probably one of the longest days of my life, just sitting in that fucking gambling cave as Ohio's Tate, other gentleman who's with Brandon Walker and Big Ev were celebrating and drinking the tears of Notre Dame fans around the world. But on January 4th, 1925, a gentleman named Johnny Lujack was born. I'm only going to tell you about him, not to be a homer for being a Notre Dame grad or anything like that. Talk to me about who your favorite athlete is right now. Whoever your favorite athlete is right now, and then tell me everything that athlete has done. Like everyone at home, just kind of tell me about the current athlete that you love more than any other. I don't know what that answer is for me. Tell me about what he's done or look about what he's done. Compare him to Johnny Lujack. In 1947, the Heisman Trophy winner out of Notre Dame and one of several successful quarterbacks who hailed from Western Pennsylvania, alongside like Johnny Unitas, Joe Namath, Dan Marino, Jim Kelly, and Joe Montana. His college career was interrupted for 2 years by World War II, where he served as an officer in the United States Navy, hunting German submarines in the English Channel. Okay? When a Heisman went to fucking war, hunted submarines. While he was at Notre Dame, he held varsity letters in 4 sports: baseball, football, basketball, and track. He became the only third person to do so, and he led Notre Dame to 3 national championships in 43, 46, and 47. He played professionally for the Chicago Bears, and after 4 years in the NFL, he returned to Notre Dame as an assistant coach for 1952 and 1953 to repay Frank Leahy for giving him a scholarship. Then in 1954, he went into the car dealership business with his father-in-law, Lujack Shearbrook Chevrolet Company of Davenport, Iowa. 1958 to 61, he went into the booth for CVS to call New York Giant games. But the following year in 62, Ford signed on as a major sponsor, learned that Lujack owned a Chevrolet dealership, and they canned his ass and replaced him with the iconic Pat Summerall. So without Johnny Lujack, probably is no Pat Summerall. Before he died in 2023, stud, he made it to 98 years old. He was the oldest living recipient of the Heisman Trophy. I think that's cool. That's cool if you're a Johnny
Very much so.
Lujack made it.
Yeah.
Okay. I was like, Pat Summerall?
No, Pat Summerall, unfortunately, he's no longer with us either.
But he
back-
died a long time
We did
ago.
a deep dive into him also on Twisted History of Heisman Trophy winners with Casey.
Yes.
Yeah, we did
Yep.
Madden, too. We talked a lot
We
about
did, yeah,
Madden.
Madden's got some great fucking stories. Back to the timeline. So this is back to what happened in 1925. We're done with birthdays. On March 4th, 1925, a gentleman named Calvin Coolidge
Silent Cow.
was sworn in as the 30th president of the United States in the first inauguration to be broadcast on radio. Mm-hmm. He initially became president after Warren Harding died while in office. I think Warren Harding died maybe 2 years into
I
office.
think he was just too fat, right?
Yeah, we all are.
Did he have a heart attack?
Yeah, Warren Harding he wasn't assassinated or anything. He had,
Hard.
yeah, they said that he died of something else, but then people went back and thought maybe he had a stroke or something. I don't know. Anyway, so Warren Harding dies in office.
Yeah, they said that when Calvin Coolidge comes up as being president, taking on after Harding, they say that he came in basically to clean up the mess that Harding just dropped and left.
Oh, okay.
So it's not a very pleasant transition, that's for sure.
But so Harding dies in like maybe 22. Calvin Coolidge fills in, not elected, obviously. He was the vice president, so he was elected to vice president. Wasn't elected as president, but takes over for a dead president. So he initially became president after Harding dies.
August
and then
23.
23, okay. Then he wins the election in 1924 to serve his first full term beginning on March 4th, 1925. He never ran for a second full term, right? He finished out that one full term. But Republicans kept control of the presidency when the American people voted for Herbert Hoover in 1928. And then we all know that Herbert Hoover went on to become one of the worst presidents of all time, guiding the country directly into the Great Depression until FDR took over, winning by a landslide in 1932. If you look at the election results for the 1932 presidential election, it looks like Herbert Hoover was not liked by anyone whose last name wasn't Hoover. Herbert Hoover is not a popular guy. But Calvin Coolidge was sworn in as the 30th president on March 4th, 1925, similar to the way that we just sworn in Donald Trump as the 47th president.
45 and 47.
Yeah.
Silent Cal is a pretty cool nickname.
You're very cool. Yeah, I got no beef with Calvin Coolidge, but I don't think he's ever going to be remembered as one of the greats. What was
honestly, it's a great sports name. Like Calvin Coolidge would be a great like quarterback name. You know,
that is a good one. That's a cool one. Yeah. I'm banging the quarterback. His name's Calvin Coolidge. Any alliterative name? Mike McCarthy, Peter Parker, right?
Yeah. All funny guys used to say.
Yeah, all funny dudes. What was the most impactful court case of 1925? I don't know if everyone knows this, but I deferred admission to law school when I graduated college. I love this case. It was the Scopes Monkey trial, which, by the way, is a great name for a trial. Like, if you told me that this trial was Scopes versus the state of Tennessee, I would give a shit less. But even as a kid, you see the Scopes Monkey trial, you're like, whoo, did a fucking monkey named Scopes stab a woman? Like, you don't know what the fuck it was. It wasn't, unfortunately. The issue here was the teaching of Darwinian evolution theory, which contradicted the literal reading of Genesis that some people favored back in 1925, and some people still do. If you're ardently religious and you hold to Genesis, congratulations. If you have a little bit of, both, congratulations. And if you just believe in evolution, congratulations. The courtroom drama took place in Dayton, Tennessee. Excuse me, Dayton, Tennessee. And the man on trial was a young science teacher named John Thomas Scopes, who's charged with breaking a Tennessee law called the Butler Act, which was just passed earlier that year, forbidding the teaching of any theory that denies the story of the divine creation that was taught in the Bible. And if somebody opted instead to teach that man is descended from a lower order of animals, that was no bueno. That was the Butler Act. That was a law in Tennessee. And Scopes, who was a teacher in Tennessee, decided instead to teach about Darwinian evolution.
Well, he didn't have to go through the traditional ways of getting to that teaching spot. He was a substitute.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, he wasn't a full-time teacher.
What a bold move.
Yeah.
By Thomas Scopes. So if you look at the fanfare around this trial, it was awesome. I just used the term circus when I was talking about the guy who's raising people from the dead. But literally in Dayton, Tennessee, they had a circus outside the courtroom. They had like chimpanzees dressed up in like spats and full suits with hats.
Like Mr. Jiggs.
Yeah. They had like this deformed dwarf that they called the missing link. Poor little bastard. He's a small guy. He had like this sloped head, so he sort of looked Neanderthalish. Call him. They were selling Bibles next to booths selling toy monkeys. It was huge, right? Like it was so much so that the courtroom itself was jam-packed with people who wanted to hear what was going on, that they had to move the whole court proceedings outside onto the lawn in front of the courthouse. So thousands of people gathered to watch a guy named Williams Jennings Bryan, which is kind of familiar to people. Mm-hmm. He ran for president a bunch of times as a Democrat. I think he ran 3 times. He didn't win. And the defense was a guy named Clarence Darrow, right? And Clarence Darrow wound up bitch slapping Williams Jennings Bryan, but he did it in a losing cause, right? So Darrow knew that he was going to lose. So he had, in his only witness that he pulled up Williams Jennings Bryan. He pulled up the prosecutor and had him sit on a stand and grilled him on evolution versus Genesis. And he had the guy make a fool out of himself for all intents and purposes, then asked at the end for the jury to deliver a guilty verdict. So Williams Jennings Bryan never even got to say his closing remarks, which he was known for, right? Spent days writing those closing remarks that you see, all that stuff. So he loses, and I think Scopes was given a $100 fine, and the Tennessee Supreme Court reversed the verdict several years later. Darrow knew that people would come to their senses at some point, and it was reversed several years later. And as a result, the theory of evolution became part of the U.S.'s mainstream curriculum. So if you want to know why your kids are being taught how we crawled out of the primordial ooze and evolved into these perfect beings that we are now versus, you know, there was a man and a woman who were naked and they ate from the wrong apple on the tree, it was because of the Scopes monkey trial, which started in 1925. Again, this isn't putting down anyone's religion. If that's what you believe versus what this is, I'm very, very happy for you. But this is where evolution finally had gotten its day.
He died right after that.
Yeah.
Like right after.
What was the most the most important technological advancement of 1925? It's a good perspective tidbit. The guy who invented it is somehow not a household name like Thomas Edison or those fucking Wright brothers, but his name is John Logie Baird, the pride of Scotland. In 1888, he was born in Scotland and he studied engineering, which led him to become an inventor. Some of his inventions were fucking terrible. He made a homemade hemorrhoid cream that never took off. He also made a razor that would never rust. And the reason the razor would never rust is because it was made of sharpened glass, which would often shatter. And so in test trials, he himself, Logie Baird, almost bled to death. He tried to create diamonds from heating graphite, couldn't. He, inspired by pneumatic tires, he attempted to make pneumatic shoes. Pneumatic means anything that's filled with compressed air. So pneumatic tires that you have on your fucking car were now going to be in your shoes. It didn't work out, right? Because it was like semi-inflated balloons that burst, but it's the same exact technology that we have in Doc Martens and whatnot. You know what I mean?
Airwear.
It just didn't work out from back then. But in 1922, he started experimenting with mechanical television system that was made up of a large revolving disc with a spiral arrangement holes. And by October of 1925, he was the first to create a recognizable image complete with shades of gray. So he was the first guy to technically make a TV show. The TV show was pathetic. It had this ventriloquist dummy that went by the name of Spooky Bill. So television was born, but it would be some years later before it landed in people's homes. But the greatest technological advancement of 1925, 100 years ago, has to go to John Logie Baird. I checked it up. It's not Logie, the Scottish guy who invented the television. A lot of people take credit for the television because it wasn't just like, hey, listen, I have this television that works and put it into your fucking living room. The technology was gradual. And part of that evolution, if you will, was this guy Baird.
I wonder if they pay royalties from that movie Saw to Stooky Bill, because that's exactly what that thing in Saw looks like.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, very spooky.
Right?
I'm enjoying this, by the way. I don't know if you guys are. Most useless political agreement of 1925. What did President Trump just do? I think he stopped us from sending fucking condoms to Afghanistan or some bullshit.
To Gaza, yeah.
Something like that. Like,
I mean, it's clear.
We read about this stuff now. We wonder what is useful and what's useless, and we don't know.
Unless you're laundering money.
Yeah, but we don't know what's the most useless thing that's happened in 2025 politically, because 2025 isn't over yet, and we haven't seen the downstream.
30 days in.
Yeah, we haven't seen any kind of downstream downstream results from it. But I can tell you the most useless thing that happened in 1925 was the signing of the Pact of Locarno, or the Locarno Treaties, named after the scenic lakeside city in Switzerland. So you had Great Britain, France, Italy, Belgium, and most ironically, Germany. In the aftermath of World War I, things were a fucking mess in Europe. Nobody knew where anyone was allowed to go. Germany was obviously decimated, everything. So there was so much stuff going on in Europe that people were afraid. So they got these big hitters together, Great Britain, France, Belgium, Germany, and they said, let's play nice in the sandbox. The agreement was basically that for the 5 nations who signed, the borders between France and Germany and Belgium and Germany and all that stuff that was set by the 1919 Treaty of Versailles after World War I, those boundaries were inviolable. You couldn't violate them. They were absolute. They were untouchable. They were sacrosanct, is what I had read about it earlier. What's more, the pact stated that Germany, Belgium, and France would never attack each other except in legitimate defense, and that they would otherwise settle their disputes by peaceful means. That was signed in 1925. We all know what happened a little over a decade later, and if you don't, Adolf Hitler took a big shit all over the Pact of Locarno and tried to take over the fucking world. So it wasn't worth the paper that it was written on, and Germany didn't play nice in the sandbox. Let's keep going. As you can imagine, 1925 probably wasn't a great time to be a woman, right? Probably wasn't the greatest time to be a woman. No. Certainly wasn't a great time to be a black dude in the United States. But American women were nowhere to be seen in formal politics, at least, right? It was better than it was, but certainly not in the political arena. It was only 5 years earlier, in 1920, that the 19th Amendment passed, finally giving the women the right to vote. So women weren't really in politics because it was only 5 years before that where they weren't even able to vote on fucking politics. Along comes Wyoming's Nellie Taylor Ross. Nellie Taylor Ross. And she ran for the state's first woman governor, a position that her husband had held prior to his death not long before she won. It was a special election because her husband had died in office. She was put on the special election ticket, but she legitimately won the election to become the governor of Wyoming. As a progressive Democrat, Ross, this woman, Nellie Taylor Ross, she was nothing like me. She supported prohibition. Fuck you, right? Stricter bank regulations and increased education funding. Fuck the kids. Right? I don't agree with any of that shit. However, she was unable to have much impact on Wyoming's political policy because, 1, she was a woman, right? 2, it was 1925. It was in fucking Wyoming. And finally, the state's legislature was primarily Republican. Even so, she's remembered as a groundbreaking pioneer for women, standing for high office. And after eventually losing the governorship, Ross continued in public life, becoming the chair of the Democratic National Committee. And later, I think she did 5 terms as the boss of the U.S. Mint. So she was a stud,
really
right? She died in 1977. 1977 she died at the age of 101, right? So, second to last note, Nellie Taylor Ross remains as the only woman to have ever served as the governor of Wyoming, and it happened 100 years ago. And last note, she had huge tits.
She actually did.
No, she didn't have any tits. Yeah. Another one for the ladies. And for people from Indiana who
there might have
dislike...
been more female governors had she had them.
By the way, I'm going to mention Indiana again.
Oh, here we go.
Fibsy's not here.
He's here in spirit.
Tri-state hurricane involved Indiana, and so did this. Her name was Madge Oberholzer. This happened in 1920.
I bet Fibsy knows her. I bet Fibsy... I mean, if we...
I don't know.
Get him on the horn and be like, Fibsy, who's Madge Oberholzer?
I don't know.
He might know.
I don't know if he knows this one because...
Should I do it?
It's a terrible... You can text him.
I'm going to ask him.
Yeah. At the age of 28, a young lady named Madge met a guy named D.C. Stevenson, right? This was in 1925, January 1925 podcast. And they were at an inauguration dinner in honor of Indiana Governor Ed Jackson. At the time, this guy, D.C. Stevenson, was a prosperous businessman, and he also held the position of Grand Dragon in the Indiana Ku Klux Klan. We've talked about the Ku Klux Klan and how Indiana has a very rich history of supporting these racist pricks. Stevenson danced with her at that first meeting. They began to see each other often. One evening, Stevenson urged Madge, demanding to see her immediately. Oberholzer, Madge, then disappeared for 2 days until she was more or less dumped at her family home in a distraught and wretched state. But she was able to describe what happened to her, A drunken Stevenson had abducted her and then brutally assaulted, raped, and bit her. He bit her fucking everywhere. Like, she's got a bunch of infections from it and shit like that. A severely traumatized Oberholzer tried to kill herself with mercury bichloride tablets and was then driven to her parental home. A month later, she died. Stevenson was found guilty of kidnapping, rape, and murder and sentenced to life imprisonment, and he got out early. He didn't spend his whole life there. So why am I bringing this up other than the fact that it's kind of, I don't know, morbid, murder porn that people like to hear?
He looks like John Wayne Gacy.
This was the beginning of the end for the Ku Klux Klan in Indiana. The scandal involving a senior Ku Klux Klan member is said to have destroyed the group, with membership crashing from a high of almost 250,000 to only 4,000 by 1928.
Wow.
So in those 3 years after this incident, and listen, a lot of other stuff had happened where people came to their senses, but this kind of seemed like it was the straw that broke the camel's back, because it's not like it's a stain on an otherwise spotless history for these guys that are burning crosses and lynching people that didn't look like them. But perhaps the rape and beating and biting of Madge was the final straw for some people who were like, you know what? I'm handing in my fucking white robe. And that happened in 1925. The most impactful literary works from 1925, that's easy. On April 10th of that year, F. Scott Fitzgerald publishes The Great Gatsby. Everyone kind of knows The Great Gatsby. Not a great book, okay movie, but people know it, right?
Yep.
I mean, maybe it's a great book. People love Great Gatsby. Congrats. And on July 18th, so that was the first book. On July 18th of that same year, not long after Germany signed the Treaty of Locarno, Adolf Hitler publishes Volume 1 of his personal manifesto, which was Mein Kampf. Hitler wrote it in 1924 while in prison for high treason. Actually, the name Mein Kampf is German for, do you know? Anyway? My struggle.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he wrote it while he was in prison, and it went on to be known as one of the most dangerous books in history. Fun fact, Hitler was almost not Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler was almost Adolf Schicklgruber. I don't think he would have done as well with that. Not that he did well. He wound up, obviously dying. But his father, whose name was Alois, was born out of wedlock to somebody named Maria Anna Schicklgruber and given her surname. However, when Alois was about 40 years old, he decided to adopt the last name of his stepfather, Johann Georg Heidler, who some speculated was actually his biological father. On the legal documents, it changed from Heidler to Hitler, which nobody knows why. But if that never happened, if Alois decided not to change his name, then it would have been Adolf Schicklgruber that was responsible for the death of 6.5 million Jews.
Didn't his descendants in the United States all agree that they will not have children?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I love that.
And by the way, he had a bunch of siblings, but they all died young, except for his sister. I think only Adolf Hitler and his sister got to see adulthood. And that's it. That's almost it for the twisted history of 1925. We'll close on a very low note. The most prominent serial killer of 1925, remember this name, Fritz Harman. He was a serial killer convicted of the murder of 24 boys and young men between the ages of 10 and 20 years of age. He was guillotined in Germany on April 15th of 1925. 1925, they got rid of this guy. The only thing you're going to remember about Fritz Harman was that his nickname was the Vampire of Hanover, and some people also called him the Wolfman because his preferred method of killing people would be to bite their throats open. So he would get you. He was, mostly men, which he would rape or whatnot. So he's a homosexual rapist. And he would then try and rip your Adam's apple out with his teeth. So
he looked like Hitler. He had that Hitler stash.
Fritz Harman, yeah. Bon voyage to Fritz Harman. Bon voyage to a lot of the other scumbags that we mentioned here. And bon voyage to January of 2025 and the whole fucking year of 1925. And also bon voyage to this edition of Twisted History. We'll see you guys next time. Oh, Johnny, what else do we got going on? We got some stuff. By the way, I'm doing a new show. Did I tell you this?
What?
In February, we're doing a weekly show for You Got to Try This.
It's awesome.
Oh,
We're
nice.
We're going to do that.
Fun.
I think we're going to have Mangolds come in for the first episode, and we're going to eat that Grater's ice cream. Ever hear of Grater's? It's a greatest.
Yeah. You told me about the chip.
Yeah, so they're doing it with the chili,
Yeah.
Skyline chili,
Uh-huh.
which has a lot of warm spices in it. There's not going to be ground beef in the ice cream. So me and Mangold are going to eat that. Every week, I'm just going to try to talk to people about food. I'm going to highlight the restaurants that I'd gone to the week before. I'm going to try to do maybe like 2 restaurants a week. And so Ron had mentioned it on his new show. Shout out Ron.com, which is
Yep.
going to be
Subscribe.
dropping, a live show every Wednesday at 9
Yeah,
a.m.
you could pop in and join him every so often. I bet.
You know what? This isn't like, even though he was nice enough to mention me on the first episode, I have a tremendous amount of respect for Roan, and I would watch a stool that he produced, much less a show. I think the guy is fascinating. He was nice enough to say how, you got a guy like Large going out there and trying all the stuff, the food, and like kind of hammering out. And so he'd said that at some point he'd like to have me come in and talk about it. After I'd asked him, I said, Roan, if I could ever do anything with you, I would jump at it. So keep an eye out for that. It's every Wednesday at 9
Yeah, you're a morning
a.m.
guy too. So.
I love the mornings. Every Wednesday at 9 a.m., it's Roan.com, which is live right here from the New York office.
So,
Go.
sorry.
No.
Yeah,
And then
finish
whenever, we're going to start the last week in February, we're going to start dropping, you got to try this. And I'm going to have chefs, people from Barstool, just people, just to talk about food, which I love to do.
Rubbin picks up.
Rubbin is Racing starts up the week after the Super Bowl before we go down to Daytona. This year we're taking Jersey Jerry and I believe Rico, and also St. Anne and Bridget are coming down too, which I'm really looking forward to. We go immediately to Atlanta the week after. We're kind of front-ending some of these NASCAR trips. So a couple of balls in the air. We've got a couple of balls in the air. I believe the Bolt stool is dropping right.
Soon.
Yeah, it's dropping
right after Super Bowl. So Super Bowl's next week.
I just did a show with Donnie. Donnie, the Wonton Don, has a show called Drop a Pin. So I just did an episode of that where he asked people to talk about a spot that you're very familiar with. So let's say with Annie, drop a pin in New Jersey and recite all the counties in New Jersey. Don't do it.
I'm not.
Recite all the counties in New Jersey. Like it would just be, for a girl who used to tease her hair to Jesus to fucking watch Bon Jovi, that would probably be where you dropped a pin. I dropped a pin on Wall Street, told a couple old school Wall Street stories, so it was a fun time catching up with Donnie and Chaps too. I didn't mention that.
Do you have any ads? Do we have any ads?
Just the one at the top,
Okay.
better help. So
I got the story.
go.
So it became even more relevant because of today's unfortunate news.
Yeah.
But I had actually written it down before, ironically enough, because it has a tie to 9/11. So I was like, I'll keep track of this. So Sean Rooney and Beverly Eckert, does that ring a bell?
Doesn't.
Okay.
No.
So Sean Rooney passed away on 9/11. So I'll give you a little bit of backstory. He was born in Buffalo, New York.
Okay.
He went to Canisius High School, which I believe my grandfather went to. I
Really?
think it's in Amherst. I think that's right. Buffalo Academy Sacred Heart, Buffalo guy. Bills fan, probably, right? Blah, blah, blah. Fast forward. Was he he was one of the pilots, I want to say? No, not one of the pilots. Okay. But on one of the flights, passed away in 9/11. His wife goes on to become an advocate. Her name was Beverly Eckert.
Mm-hmm.
She dies in the 2009 plane crash
Oh my
going
God.
to Buffalo to do something for him. Right? Isn't that crazy?
That's fucking nuts, man.
Wow.
It really, it's the coincidence.
does
That's
anybody
the
know-
last time that there was this domestic.
How does
First time we
anybody
had a
fly
domestic
in that
plane
family?
crash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So isn't that spooky?
It's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know if I said all of the connections, but that was.
I see it right now in
yeah.
New York Times archives. A 9/11 widow killed in crash near Buffalo. Beverly Eckert, the widow of Sean Rooney, who died in September, died in a plane crash near Buffalo, and that was the last time we had a domestic plane crash.
How do you fly anywhere as a family member after that?
And one of the things is that her final conversation with her husband has whipped around too. Like she was lucky enough, I think, to maybe talk to him.
Oh, really?
So if
She
you
got
look
a
on
call?
places like Upworthy and
Yeah,
stuff
they
like that.
both died in plane crashes.
That's fucking terrible. Yeah.
What are the chances, the odds?
How old were they? Did they have kids?
I don't know. It's what I mean. I almost didn't say all of the things.
He was
but,
50 in September 11th.
Oh, so then they probably
Yeah,
had children.
probably. Yeah. And then yeah,
Yikes!
it's
That's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
fucking nuts.
Sorry to end on a.
no. I mean,
No,
I
it's
try. I almost
fascinating.
closed on a serial killer that bites your throat off. But
Real quick too, I did want to add the Stanko thing. If you have
Stanko.
if you have a film, just throw out a rating, and then we'll look it up and see if you saw it. If you didn't, we'll just give your own.
Yeah, so Stanko was one of the gentlemen here. For people who didn't hear last time when we spoke about him, an uber talented and an uber hardworking guy.
Yeah.
We were just speaking. So we have like guys like Chico Technico, right? And
Yep,
Andrew
he's
comes
great.
in, and Jason. All the guys who help us out in the tech booth are wonderful, and Stanko is one of them. And unfortunately, we lost him to cancer not too long ago. Left behind a wife, and his thing was Sneaky, just a huge movie guy, right? He just review stuff, right, John?
Yeah.
And his own like YouTube channel and stuff like that. And I didn't know about that until after the gentleman had passed. So if you guys have anything, like I had mentioned today, how John should see the outfit.
Yes.
I wonder if Stanko had seen that. I should check.
We should.
Yeah, I
'cause-
was gonna look because I had recently seen Book of Eli, which I had never watched, so I wanted to
You
see.
Oh wait, with fucking Denzel.
Yeah.
Denzel, yeah.
I kind of
I
like
wanted
that
to
movie.
Yeah, I'm
You
sure
did like
Did
it.
you like it or no?
I don't know. I wanted to find. I got to find it.
Yeah, I remember because he had those like those Gurkha knives, those curved ones that I used to own for
Yeah.
some fucking reason. Why did I own those? I used to own Gurkha swords. It was this
We
big.
have.
And it was one of he was protecting a Bible, right, or something. Yeah, that was the.
There was a girl. That
Oh,
only
that's a
someone could
spoiler
read.
alert. I'm so sorry.
Wow,
Book of
I
Eli.
mean, it's a
Yeah.
14-year-old movie. At this point.
Yeah. So, but that was it with thing. All right. So, so that's going to be it for us. But John, the Bolt Stool stuff is what you had shot,
Yeah.
right, in Turkey, where we
Yeah.
brought all those guys over there and got them hair plugs. So it was like White Sox
Yeah,
Dave,
it's very
Yes.
funny stuff. So it's gonna
Yeah.
come out right after Super
I can't
Bowl.
wait to see it.
We'll put
Mickey
out trailers.
Smokes. Eddie was over there. Wonton Don, Ken Jack. By the way, they're releasing this shit now. They're releasing this stuff now. All these guys, their hairs are starting to come in. Everybody looks kind of good. Like I was in
Yeah.
Chicago. I've been in Chicago
Yeah, it's a process.
every week for the past 3 weeks for whatever reasons. And they're starting to slowly look better. All right, so just to get back to it, Twisted History, thank you very much for your continued support. We'll talk to you guys real soon.